number one, what do people need to understand most when it comes to financial literacy, and especially as it relates to like the banking, banking and financial institutions as well.
Right.
And you said that it's understanding that we've been left out of so much because we don't know. And I think I bring up banking because when it comes to access to capital and how to gain all of that, you bring an example from Instagram, like an Instagram post about having business structured correctly so that you're able to take advantage of the PPP loans or the other loans or grants that came out, and a lot of people weren't able to in many cases, not because they just they were just let out because of their their race or one. And I understand like
that's a big part of it, yeah.
Right,
But
I understand the underlying like systemic issues that cause that, but that like there are ways that one would have been able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that on an institutional level, we're left out of a lot of conversations, but like we can sort of start at a base level, right? There's got to be a base, and I think there's not enough of a conversation about like what that baseline would be, right? So we talk about, okay, well, you we're left out of these conversations about how to organize things and do whatever, and what Community Cap is really here to do is like, all right, well, let's establish a baseline, right? Maybe we don't solve, again, not having the answer, right? So maybe we don't solve financial literacy. Right, but if we establish a baseline for somebody to know where they can start at, and show them a couple of directions that they can take it at, right? I think we've done our job, right? If we can make you hungry to find more, right? You're gonna find it. You're gonna figure it out because we started you somewhere, right?
And I think part of that too is realizing that when it comes to finding success and achieving, it's also we have to think about it culturally too, and that's something that Sekou and I have been talking about. In that so like you mentioned Deer Park or Nike or certain companies, and how some entrepreneurs or business owners might compare themselves, or you might even compare yourselves to people around you, which it's not a good thing, but like that happens, right?
I mean, and it's important,
it's important to talk about, but you also we have to start thinking culturally as well, right? Like and defining success, culturally, and not seeing, because in the environments that I'm in, I see a lot of people who, it's easy for them to get the $50,000, loan or grant or whatever, from their uncle, or it might raise $1 million, and it's not as much of a challenge as it is for like the next person or other people that I might be around, and so then you start realizing that like it's like a different game. It's to come at it from a different lens.
It's very crazy because so, and that's part of why my friend and I started Community Capital. And it's definitely why Rhetoric took the turn it did. Right, we wanted to be more culturally responsive when it came to educating and empowering, right? Because consulting firms are a dime a dozen, right? You got your Deloitte's, you got your Ernst & Young's, you got all these other places, right, that work on operating, like, business efficiencies and use all these like algorithms to do certain things. And it works for a lot of people, right? But culturally speaking, they don't have what we have, right? And that's a skill set. That's something that has a value, right? But we sort of write it off as like, it's like, okay, cool, you guys are a little spicy or whatever, but are you smart? And it's like, no, we do. And we also have this, as Jasmine talked about, emotional intelligence. We have this cultural responsiveness. Honestly, it's cultural competency, not responsiveness. That, will be the difference between somebody implementing something that you sent to them and them just rejecting it, right? Or them not understanding it. So to bring it back to what I do with Rhetoric, right? One of the things that we're the next pivot, right? I'm showing my hand here. The next pivot for Rhetoric is starting a business is a big deal, right? And it could be part of like a bigger journey. It can be a lot of things. We want to help businesses celebrate that journey, right? So what we're going to do is after we register, we get all your paperwork, we're going to help you throw a party. We're going to do a photo shoot. We're going to do all of that, right? To like almost like a little like business baby shower right on the spot, right? And because we want to encourage people to jump into this game and take that leap. And sometimes it's a very lonely process especially when you're the first person that in your friend group or in your family that's doing that. So we want to make it feel a little warmer, right? And give you access to our networks. Same thing with community capital. In banking, I started my career in banking as just like a regular banker in West Philly, right? And I was in the hood. Right? I had people who had jobs, had a 401k. I had people who were hustlers, right? I had the hustlers' clients. I had everybody, anything you could think of. I had people, right? I had college professors I had a college professor who had been all over the world, but came back to the hood because his mom grew up there and he just wanted to be there. Dude had money, like crazy money, like he would just send money all over the place. But black guy, really dope. And so the difference in them sort of getting loans, lines of credit, getting to build their stuff up versus when I moved to Rittenhouse, right? In a fancier branch with different people. I had a construction company that operated for 15 years, right? And he just grinded. He made a lot of money, but like he also, his books weren't necessarily right because he was just like, look, I'm worried about making the money. On his taxes, he'd say he made like $50,000 a year. He might have touched 150, but he made $50,000, right? Which has its limitations. He could never get a loan from us. Then I had these other guys who actually live in Brewery Town, which is kind of crazy. And these two white guys, they worked in like corporate finance for a little bit. Their parents also had some money and stuff. Worked in corporate finance for a little bit and was like, we don't like that no more. Left corporate finance. Started a little construction company. Their clients were their friends who were also in corporate finance. Did over their houses, did over their parents' houses, stuff like that, right? Made some money doing it. Came to us and was like, yo, we want 50,000. We're like, bet. Off the rip. It was like, yeah, absolutely, whatever you need, right? And it was just so much different because that's not to say that they don't know what they're doing or they're not intelligent or talented, but their whole experience was just way easier. Right? They had the networks already. Money was never really the issue. And then the people they were around also had a need for it. So they never really had to go out and get crazy clients yet because they were able to start small with people who already had stuff and then use that body of work to book much bigger deals. So
I just want to make sure, I want to thank those who are able to join us today. We appreciate you. Please make sure you participate by asking questions, drop your comments, because you are part of this conversation. So we want to make this as active as possible. So thank you for that. And I think it goes back to, again, with this moment that we've had based on our previous show. This idea you're talking about, it's not what you know, it's who you know, but also who you know in regards to what they know, right? So it's just it's just so, I'm just amazed to see this idea that there's this aspect of you learn the skills, right? There's this aspect of you want to start a company, but where's the biggest gap is also about who are your connections,
I think about it
why is that my question, you mentioned cut you off, Stephon. Why is that such a cultural setback for us as a black people?
There's a
what's the deficiency?
there's a lot of it. All right, so I think about it. You guys just went bowling the other day, right? You went bowling? Okay, yeah. So I saw it on your story, right?
You don't want to see me on there.
This guy's real bowling.
Right. So let me. I'll use that example for a second, right? So you went bowling, right? There are a lot of us who are bowling and we're okay, right? But we'll hit a gutter ball or two, right? There's other people who apparently like Sekou who are just nice, right?
I'm not.
But then
we got fact check that one. Right?
But then there are people who are okay, but they're playing with the bumpers up, right? That bumper is the access to networks. That bumper is the capital on hand, is the having somebody in your corner who can make it happen. And it's not cheating, right? You shouldn't be upset if you have people around you who can help make it happen, right? I think for a lot of us are the first people in our families and our networks to be doing the things that we're doing. So sometimes we don't have that network around us. Yeah. That's part A. It's multifaceted. Part B is sometimes we get so obsessed with being the first or being self-made or being the person to do it that we feel this pressure. It's partially our fault, but partially society's expectations of us to want to do it all and do it all by ourselves, right? A la me spending 39 hours straight on a website, which, by the way, it took me 3 weeks to do the first time. So like, I spent a lot of time on this thing, right? And it sucked. It was terrible. I just put the money up and then eventually it was just much better. Like I was just like, I should have just done that the first time. But like wanting to feel like every element was something that I did by myself. I got this out the mud. It's like, no, that should not be the goal. The goal should be to have a sustainable thing that does something for our community and not that you did it yourself. Right? When we operate that way, we're always going to be a little bit behind because there are going to be people who are putting it together overnight because they had a team of 10 and they did it well. And you're putting it together like okay, but you get to say that you did it for yourself, which outside of you being excited about that, right, and celebrating yourself for it, what does that do? Right? Like, is it about you doing it yourself or is it about doing something great? So that was something that I had to personally fight with. And I do this a lot too, because I'm the type of person, the second I see that like somebody on my team or somebody around me is a little shaky, nah, you good. I got it. Don't worry about it. Like I do that all the time. And I had to really start to think of, let me make sure I'm choosing better, right? And respecting people's boundaries around what they need to do and what they need. But also, is it about me doing it myself or do I want it well? Do I want something that's sustainable, that's going to live beyond me, or do I just want to be able to beat my chest and say I did it? The third thing is that when we do get to that level, right, there's a lot of sort of centrifugal forces that sometimes stop us from giving back, right? One of it is I suffered, I'm here now, let me just enjoy my thing, right? Another is, because you gave up so much in the process, you look at the next person and you're like, well, you shouldn't get it easy, right? I earned my stripes to be here. Like, why would I just give that to you, right? And one thing I learned early on, this is before, I would never even say that I'm like established. I'm not where I think I'm going to be, right? But if anybody came to me and said, hey, Steph, like, could you give me some advice on X, right? Or talk to me a little bit. Like, you can pick my brain. Like, I'm not going to consult for you for free, but you can pick my brain. And the reason why I give away so much free stuff, so many answers, is because, like, I can give you the things you need to know if you're a client or a potential client, but you need me for the strategy. Like, you need me to execute and implement it, A. B, nobody in here can do what I do, how I do it, right? And same thing for you, right? You guys have One Jollof, right? I can create something tomorrow. It's not going to be what you guys have, right? I can try to do the exact same thing, and it won't be the same thing because you guys bring your own energy, you guys bring your own identity into it, and the people that you would reach and impact will not be the same people. But I think sometimes we lose that in our process, and we're like, nah, you can't, because the world around us is like that. So those are some things there, and I would never say it's a deficiency. It's just something. It's a condition that we're currently under that is slowly changing, which each of us sort of like rising up and doing our own thing. The more that we look back and have conversations like this, the more that businesses like mine exist, the more that nonprofits and things, good people exist, the less that's going to be after our generation and so on and so forth.
So, a wise man once said, and this wise man is actually going to be coming on our show soon. Shout out to Suleiman Rahman, but he said, success is when you create value for yourself, but significance is when you create value for other people. And so, with that, I know one of your goals, right? Is by the end of 2021 to help 100 businesses grow, 100 small businesses or nonprofits grow. What inspires you to come up with that
Yeah.
goal? And it sounds like something that's very intentional too. It's like a number to it.
Right. So for me, it's like being specific about it. So there's a difference between sort of like an intent, right, and an actual like, this is my vision, right? So like, you can be like, yeah, I wanted to go to the store today, but I didn't go to the store today because of whatever. You intended to go to the store, right? But because you weren't like, yo, look, I need to get this thing by this date because this, right? It wasn't a priority. Like, it wasn't something that you were like focused on. You won't get to it when you get to it, right? So that's part of it. I think the other thing is, and shout out to the person who's gonna be on the show soon. For me, my whole personal mission is, I'm here to help as many people as I can do as much as they can. So if, that's how I define success for myself, right? So I can make $1 billion tomorrow and I'm like, yeah, that's great. Right. But if I didn't help anybody create something out of it, then like, what did I do? Right? So that's a big part of why that's a goal. Yeah.
It goes to this idea of impact, right? And that's so interesting because, so do you see this movement around, like, you talk a lot about individualism. Sometimes we internalize, like, I hustle, I work hard, this is all mine. Now I decide to pick like who get to be part of this success. But then there's also like a point in your life where there's a lot of people expect a lot from you, which is like, when did you reach this moment? Like, goes back to what Key was saying. Well, like, this is not about me anymore. This is also about like this collective idea of making sure that I am helping my community. Most importantly, I'm actually helping our young and black and brown people for them to also achieve this level of success.
Right. So I'll go back to my like elementary and high school days. So in New York City, there is called specialized high schools, right? Every city sort of has that, but it's a network of schools essentially that are like the Ivy League schools of New York City, and you have to test into them. So I tested into one of those schools. So I went to Brooklyn Tech for high school, and so like a lot of people who I grew up with, our trajectories went like that, right? And part of the reason is, I was surrounded by people who just like expected excellence out of me, right? And like that was just like the baseline. It was like, all right, you gotta be good, like, because everybody here is good, right? And even though technically speaking, I didn't do that great in school, right? I had like a 73 average. Mostly because I didn't do homework. I just,
Thank you for that.
I was like, I'll be real. I'll be real. I just didn't do homework.
Because the way you dress, man.
Yeah, like, I didn't do homework, but like you weren't seeing me on like the leadership side. Like it was just, so like I was in clubs, I was doing all this stuff, but like I was just not gonna do the homework. Like it was what it was. I got in a lot of trouble for that, but yeah, no, I didn't do homework. And so for me, it was like being surrounded by that and being, around people who, and there's lots of things I can critique about that school, but the one thing I can always say is that the education and the look, this is what you gotta be at because we expect you to surpass this in X much time, really sort of bred a different sort of like hunger in myself that even like my younger brother or people who I grew up with, they just didn't get at their schools, right? And it's not that I was smarter than them, right? It was, I had an opportunity, I did well, we could talk standardized testing, I was a great test taker, but like, I just got opportunities to be great all the time, right? And in other places, it's not the same. So, by the time I got to a stage where greatness was expected of me, I'm like, all right, it's nothing. I'm used to that, right? Whereas people who were not equipped for it, it becomes difficult. So for me, it was like, okay, well, I saw that. How do I make sure it doesn't end that way? Right? Because like at this particular point in time, let's say I'm graduating from high school, this particular point in time, I feel like I can do anything, right? Because I've been here. and somebody else doesn't feel like their options are the same. How do I make sure that they have some options now? Right? And I've just always been that type of way. And I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't even applaud myself for doing it. It's just sort of like something that was sort of instilled in me. It's like, all right, if I'm eating, like, how can I watch other people not? Right? Even if you can't have my entree, like if I have an appetizer or dessert, you're gonna have something, right? I can't eat a whole 3-course meal and just watch people not. So, and you know, on top of that, show you where I got it from or how to make it or something, right? So me now, even before I got to this stage, even when I didn't have anything at all, it was like whatever skill set I attained, it was like, okay, well, how do I help you wherever it is to do it? Sometimes people wait till they've like reached a certain level of success or reached a certain level of like fame or clout, whatever you want to call it, to do it. And it's like, no, do that now. If you do something and you do it at a high level, help somebody around you get there.
Right. And for me, Stephon, it's also about making a difference. You know, making a difference for your friends, families, but also like the community that we live in. Seema actually have a question here that I want to make sure like I bring to your attention. She said, what do you think about banking black?
So I think that's important. And developing black infrastructure and black and brown infrastructure is really going to be the way that this country becomes anything close to the greatness we think it could be. But I would also say if you're in a position to do that, then do that. If you're not, don't. There's other ways to build that up, right? So one of the things that's like, you know, important right now is, you know, there are a few black banks. One of them is First Citizens, which is a dope bank, but they're not national yet, right? Some people don't really have the opportunity to bank there because there's certain important resources that you need in a bank that's local to you, right? So if you are, you know, just trying to like get yourself out there, like struggling to make ends meet, that might not be the bank I would go with because you lose a debit card with them, you got to wait for it to get to you, right? Whereas you might be able to get it the same day somewhere else, and that could be the difference between getting a key card and not. You know what I'm saying? So if you got to start at wherever you're in the position to offer value, right? And where it's valuable to you. But banking black is important. I think the other thing is, from sort of an insider's perspective, I'm not going to talk about the bank I'm at or anything like that, but it was really crazy this year as a leader of a team, right? Because I have a team of employees, to watch a lot of these riots that happened this year. Because it brought banking to its knees. And I don't think enough people have noticed it, but seeing it from the inside is crazy. Because, you know, we talk about, you know, wherever people stand on rioting, right? Some people are like, look, rioting doesn't solve anything. Some people say protests don't solve anything, whatever. The way I see it is that all of those things are important, and all of those things kind of sort of have to happen at the same time, right? So you have people who are more revolutionary, who are like out there in the streets doing their thing, right? You have people more like myself that sort of lead through sort of like thought leadership and influencing and trying to, you know, get the voices of the unheard and project it using a particular platform. Then you have people who are just like, fuck all that. Like, we about to beat some things up. Like, we just gonna get out. And all of those things have their place. So in the banking world, you know, all the things that happened with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and all that, right? They were like, oh yeah, you know, we stand with them. We understand that. Okay, cool. Then they started looting banks. And it was like, and this is because of that? And everybody's like, And they're like, okay, can somebody explain to us why this is happening? And we're like, oh, hey, black guy here. This is what's going on, right? And they're like,
all of a sudden, you have the money.
Right. You know, and all of a sudden, right, instead of these very white, pale boardrooms, like trying to decide, you know, trying to understand all of this, they were like, wait, hold on. We got a bunch of people who work for us who might have an understanding of what's going on. And more you saw people start to like take the floor on okay, talk about your experience with this thing. Why is it impacting people the way they do? We have a bank here that, you know, just got broken into or whatever. Yeah. Is this just a random bout of violence, or like what is really going on? And so a lot of people in the community, you know, everybody who I talked about, the revolutionaries, right? The people who don't really care about any of that stuff, but wanted to like sort of make a point. The people like myself who are really trying to gather people, all of that happened at once. And then you started seeing banks be like, all right, we're gonna put up $1 billion over 10 years on this, right? Chase Bank just talked about a $30 billion initiative, right? PNC talked about $1 billion. Bank of America talked about $1 billion. Citizens Bank talked about 500 million. And that stuff was not happening unless somebody threw a brick through a window and did something.
You started to realize, because, you know, with George Floyd dying, we're seeing people outside of our communities who are now starting to get it, or starting to understand, you know, what we've kind of understood for the longest time. And it seems like now there's certain measures that are being taken. So you talk about banking industry.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like the banking industry, there's retail banking, and then there's like corporate banking. There's all sorts of things to it, right? But banks are ran by shareholders, right? So people who own the pieces of the bank make those decisions. But until those people look more like the people who are being affected, it can never be any real conversations. And even then, to be honest with you, right, this is being a shareholder, like how banks work, is about, it's a business model. Banks are businesses, right? So I think as consumers, once we educate ourselves on like, all right, well, this is the arena I'm going into, and this is what I want for myself. Like if we come into it more knowledgeable about what we're up against, we can have more positive experiences, right? Even if we're banking black, right? It's not a non-profit bank. Like there's still things that have to happen, right? So if we go into it with the understanding of like, okay, well, you know, this is how overdrafts work, and yes, it can be predatory at times or whatever, which is regulated, by the way. Banks get fined for that. When you enter into it, we're not playing into the hands of other people. We sort of take more control. And I think over the last 6 months, we've seen some more of that, right? We've seen all of a sudden people make more of an initiative to be like, all right, well, I don't want just like black and brown bodies. I want black and brown minds in our conversations. I want, you know, we're not looking at diversity as how many shades of brown are in a room, but I'm more about like how many people can affect policy for real, right? Behind the scenes, banks get fined all the time for like discrimination stuff, and you know, very quietly try to improve those processes. But I think this sort of expedites it and brings it to light. Like when you're in banking and you take corporate trainings, they say, hey, look, you can't do this because Bank A just got fined like 300 million 5 years ago for XYZ. This is the reason why. So like, it's out there. This stuff exists. And we don't have enough of a conversation about it because, you know.
It's like you say, it's just all about knowledge, right? It's all about, and also like, it would be great to be aware of like, you know, what banks are out there that actually like creating opportunity for and making an impact in the society, like in a community, black community, for example. Like which bank is actually not just here just milking this particular community, but which bank is also giving back and creating like opportunity for like anybody in that community to start their own businesses and stuff like that. That's another like important like knowledge to know. So as sort of like as average people, we could really continue to sort of hold these banks accountable. You know.
I mean, and businesses
force them to be part of change. You know, we don't have to wait for like another death of a black man for us to trigger these institutions to really make a positive impact in our community.
Right. No, for sure. I think that's the more that we're able to hold businesses, not even just banks, but businesses accountable for what value they're bringing the community outside of actual dollars, the better we can do, because you can't quantify value in money, right? Or in just money. Value is so much beyond that, right? Because essentially speaking, I as business owner can throw $100,000 at a nonprofit dedicated to doing XYZ, I get the $100,000 tax write-off. Nonprofit in the community does whatever. There's no mechanism for evaluating nonprofits' impact on that community, and I get to chill because I gave $100,000. You can't say I didn't, right?
I think you get into a really important point, and I know we've been going on for a while, but I do want you to talk more about this, or elaborate more about this. This idea that you can't only quantify value in money. Like what other ways can you quantify value? Because most people, I think, quantify, especially living in a capitalist society, they quantify value.
Well, so
how much revenue are you bringing?
Right. So it's like, okay, you can bring in revenue, that's cool, but like, how many lives are you improving at the end of the day? Like, who is living better because of this? And if I follow the money, whose life is improving? And if it's the same 10 people, then you ain't do nothing, right? And I'm not gonna go super deep into this, but one of the biggest things was the Red Cross. So the Red Cross raised like $600 million for Haiti and did all that stuff, and Haiti didn't do a dime better because the money got circulated between its board and contractors who are also people who are cool with the nonprofit. So it was like, that money that we think is getting circulated the right way actually just keeps moving around in the same place. So the transfer, the thing is like we're measuring it in dollars, but it's not the transfer in wealth, right? So unless I see a nonprofit with their results and say, hey, look, these are the families we're able to impact. This is the breakdown of our money and all of that. And this is why I work so closely with nonprofits so they can compete on that level. Unless you're able to do that, you're not impressing me with the amount of money raised. Being in banking, I've seen people raise a lot of money. It's about where it goes and how and what's the result of that money that make it happen. Because the numbers will excite people, but the impact is what's really important. So, yeah.
I think we should close out with that. That was a real gem right there. Stephon, we appreciate you, brother, for coming on our show. Honestly, for me personally, every time I'm on this show, I learn so much. So not only like I do this because I want to empower the diaspora, but for me it's like it's a moment of where I get to. It's a lot of teachable moments for me as well. For sure. So I appreciate you on a personal level, but I also appreciate you for coming here and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. And I'm sure Aki is going to follow up on a few things. But just to close us out, do you have any advice for, imagine that you were 10 years old. What advice would you give to
10-year-old
a
Stephon?
10-year-old like young black man out there?
Okay.
Young black boy, I mean.
Wow.
He's somewhere you at now.
Wow. Okay. First thing I would say is tell your dad that you want your hair cut a specific way. That'd be the first thing, because I really was letting him do this light Caesar thing that was just not working for my head. But I think I would tell 10-year-old Stephon, when I was 10, I knew that I was like talented. I knew I was smart, right? But I just didn't know all the ways that I could have applied that talent, and what would come of it, right? And so I would tell 10-year-old Stephon to just follow through and watch what happens, right? So, and what I mean by that is, okay, you want to do this thing, right? And I think this is a thing that happens a lot with just gifted and talented people, right? But particularly people of color, right? We're good at a thing, or we think we're good at a thing, and because we're used to seeing success immediately, the second we start to see something that's like, damn, I may not actually be nice at this, right? We leave it. We walk away from it, right? And what I would tell myself is follow through on that specific thing, the thing that you felt like you're not good at, or that you didn't see the results at immediately. Follow through with that and see what happens. Because I think that had I developed that skill a little earlier in my life, I think a lot of the things I went through now, I probably would have been able to capitalize on a little earlier. because I wouldn't feel so insecure as my status as smart or valuable or whatever, and tie it all up in, can I win at this specific thing right now?
Yeah.
You know, so that'd be advice to my 10-year-old self, is like not be so wrapped up so much in my identity as being smart or whatever. I'm smart regardless of what happens here. Right? I have value regardless of what happens here. Follow through and see what happens. So
that's good. That's good. Yeah. I just want to say thank you too for coming through. I learned a lot also, and also thank you for being vulnerable with your story. Yeah. I think that when we're all able to be transparent and vulnerable, it makes it easier for everyone around us to do the same, and be able to tell their own stories as well. To everyone who's tuned in with us today, we want to hear from you. Yeah. As you go out into the world, be kind to each other. We got a couple months left in 2020. We're still in the midst of COVID. Stay tuned for the next Pepper Soup Talk, which will be coming your way. And that wraps it up. Thanks, Stephon.
Yeah, that's it. And like Stephon said, it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Just learn from it.